George Belichicks here with Zach Cox outside of Gillette Stadium. It is a season finale preparation for the New England Patriots right now, but no focus is really on their matchup with the Jets on Sunday. All focus on Bill Belichick and what lies ahead if his future remains here in New England or elsewhere. Zach, we start right there. What do you think this Sunday entails for Bill Belichick, and what do you think it entails for his future with the team and for his future with Robert Kraft as well?
We don't really know. That's the most fascinating part. This game is, 4 days away, 5 days away? And we have not heard any definitive reporting one way or the other that the Patriots are planning to keep Bill Belichick next season or planning to part ways with Bill Belichick. If I had to make a personal prediction, I say the latter is probably more likely, just based on the way the season has transpired, based on where the roster is right now, based on some of the coaching staff questions, and based on Robert Kraft's own statements in the past, the last two off seasons saying, I want to be back in the playoffs. Patriots clearly have gone in the opposite direction. So I think if you're picking one of the two, I think the most likely path is Bill Belichick is gone next season. But there has seemed to be a little bit of, I guess, movement in the other direction just with how well the team has played lately relative to how they looked before that. The fact that they're clearly still playing hard for Bill Belichick, their defense is very good, and they've been hit hard by a lot of injuries. But that's the number one storyline in sports this week. Is this going to be Bill Belichick's last game? And right now we do not know.
Am I too harsh to say I don't care what this team's looked like the last 4 or 5 weeks? Because you've seen the last 4 years, missing the playoffs 3 times the last 4 years. Your only appearance, you got ran out of the building by the Buffalo Bills. And we've seen drafting where he hasn't signed a top 3 pick first 3 rounds since Duron Harmon to a second contract, which you pointed out. Am I too harsh to say that? Or I'm saying this isn't a decision in a vacuum. You have such a big sample size on why you're making this decision with Bill Belichick.
Yeah, I don't think that what the Patriots have shown in the second half of this season really should change all that much from Robert Kraft's calculus. Yes, if they had completely bottomed out, maybe it would make his decision a little bit easier. But I mean, this is what the Patriots have been for several years now. They're a tough team that rarely gets blown out, that always has a pretty good defense. But their offense has been one of the NFL's worst in the last 2 seasons. It looks like they need full-scale changes on that side of the ball. And as you mentioned, the drafting has been poor. The free agency decisions, by and large, have been poor. And there's the fact that Bill Belichick is both the head coach and the general manager. I think this would be a very different conversation if it was just Bill Belichick, the coach, that you're deciding on, because I do think if they move on from him, they're probably accepting a downgrade in that area. But he's also the one who assembles this roster, who assembles this coaching staff, and given the fact that he's done it for the last 24 years, I don't know if you'll be able to have one without the other. I personally don't think you'll be able to have one without the other. I don't think he's going to accept, say, half of his workload next season, say, hey, I'll coach, bring in somebody else to build the roster. I just don't think that's in his DNA, which is part of why it makes this such a difficult decision here for Robert Kraft in this organization.
Yeah, and if the latter happens, it's tough for me to fathom a holistic existence between a GM, possibly from the outside, likely from the outside, and Bill Belichick going with the personnel that guy's picks. He'll hold grudges against him. You get an athletic 6'2", 220-pound linebacker, that's not my type of guy. I'm not playing him.
It's such a narrow path to walk with that, too, because it would have to be somebody who Bill Belichick respects enough to work with and collaborate with, but not somebody that will just defer to Bill Belichick at every turn. And then you end up essentially with the situation that they have right now, where Matt Groh runs the Patriots personnel department technically, but Bill Belichick has final say over everything. So if you're going to make any real changes in that area and make the necessary changes to improve this roster and improve this coaching staff, again, I don't even know who you could pick that would qualify or satisfy both of those criteria, that Belichick will say, I'm willing to work with this guy, and I will actually listen to what he has to say.
You bring up Matt Groh, one of the guys that he signed to this year, and give him incentive-based contract. That's Trent Brown. And the keys to that was give him workload and playing time incentives that'll keep him motivated to play all year. Healthy scratch Sunday, not at practice today. What does it tell you about Trent Brown's status? We don't know. He might pop up on the injury report later today, but a no-show at practice where Bill Belichick said he's not on the injury report. We expect him to be there.
Yeah, it's really been a pretty disappointing second half of the season for Trent Brown, because if you look at what he did through weeks 1 through 8 or so, he was actually pretty good. He was one of the Patriots' better offensive players. He was out there basically every snap for the first 2 months of the season. Dealt with some injuries in that Miami game, and then things have just gone south for him in a hurry. He's dealt with a lot of different health-related things from injuries and illnesses. There have been a lot of reports that his buy-in has kind of waned as those have stacked up, and it became more and more clear that he wasn't going to hit those incentives in his contract. I mean, he has $6.5 million in playing time incentives, and he is guaranteed to hit 0 of them now because his play time is only around 60%, has to be at 65 or more to earn any of that money. And according to multiple reports, his commitment hasn't been the same since that became clear. So I don't know. I doubt we'll see Trent Brown on the field this Sunday. As you mentioned, maybe he pops up in the injury report this afternoon and ends up getting back out there later in the week. But I doubt we see him on Sunday, and I would not at all be surprised if we've seen the last of Trent Brown in a Patriots uniform, which raises big questions because Mike Onwenu, their right tackle, is also an impending free agent. You could be looking at a situation where you have to replace not only your right tackle, but also your left tackle. Very tough spot to be, given the premium on those positions in the NFL.
And in a tough free agency class, because Mike Onwenu right now, as it lines up, is the top free agent offensive tackle to hit. Yep. Trent Brown could be joining him right there as well. City So will be starting at one guard spot, Antonio Mafi the other. That's 2 guards, and Vidari Lohan left tackle. We'll see what happens on Sunday. Speaking of Sunday, Jets come to town. There's actually a game being played. Jets obviously eliminated out of the playoffs. No Zach Wilson, didn't clear concussion protocol. Patriots, of course, eliminated from this as well. What are you watching for in this game? And I don't ask that of what's a key matchup or the X factor, but a loss for the Patriots could get them up to the number 2 pick in the draft. A win, though, guarantees them at least a top 5 pick. What are you watching for this Sunday, and what do you expect?
Yeah, the game itself is not very interesting to me, honestly. It's going to be Trevor Siemian against Bailey Zappi. A lot of injuries on both sides of the ball. You're probably going to see a lot of young players playing in this game for both teams. But during the game, I'm really interested to see what the stadium reaction is to Bill Belichick, because maybe this is a case where Sunday morning we wake up and there's a report from Adam Schefter that strong indications that the Patriots will move on from Bill Belichick, and we have some kind of concrete information one way or the other there. But if this is still kind of a limbo situation, I'm really interested to see if he gets a standing ovation at some point, if there's a thank you Bill chant, if there's any kind of recognition from the Gillette crowd of Bill Belichick beyond what you would usually see in a game, and whether that's reciprocated at all. Does he wave to the crowd as he walks off? Does he do anything like that? So that's going to be fascinating to see during the game. And then obviously, as you mentioned, draft pick considerations here. Patriots can't fall any worse than the 5th overall pick. They can get as high as number 2, depending on what they do in this game, what Washington does, what Arizona does. There are a couple other games that will impact the strength of schedule for both of those teams. But obviously, number 2 is better than number 5, especially when you're looking to most likely get a new quarterback in this draft if you're the Patriots. But you also have to imagine that Bill Belichick is going to be very, very motivated to go out of this season and potentially his Patriots tenure with a win over the Jets.
Yeah, it's not just a win to end his possible end of his Patriots tenure. It's a win against the Jets, who he despises. Yes. So there's a lot that goes into that. Zach Cox, thank you so much for the time as always. Keep it locked on here, NESN.com, NESN360, NESN YouTube for full Patriots coverage now through game week, beyond the season, all up to the draft, and of course, the Bill Belichick era as well. PNC Bank, rooted in communities big and small.